In 3 days, we'll finally have the answer to the question we've been asking ourselves since March 10th. Who are the Panthers going to take number one overall? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Where on Fridays, except for this week, we got the draft. Got to talk about who the Panthers taking at number one after they do it on Friday. But next Friday, I'll be back for the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Either at me or DM me to get those weekly Friday mailbag questions in. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. 3 more days, y'all. 3 more days, and we'll finally be there to the 2023 NFL Draft, and then we'll finally find out who it's going to be there at number one overall. We think it's going to be Bryce Young. It feels like it's going to be Bryce Young. Maybe it's CJ Stroud. Maybe it's Anthony Richardson. Maybe it's Will Levis. Do they trade back? We'll see. Doesn't really feel like that's in play right now. At least that's what Scott Fitterer told us a week ago. Bryce Young, though, appears to be the pick here in Carolina, and I just want to know who's it going to be. I just want to get this guy here to Carolina and start talking about whether he can turn around the franchise and whether he can be the franchise and he can lead us to places we've never been before. David Tepper told me, promise me, and you, all of us, sustained success. He talked about short-term suffering for long-term gains and rewards. We haven't had those yet, y'all. We got a good coaching staff now. Got some decent free agents that came in to fill some of these gaps. Got a strong foundation defensively. Even if Avero is only here for a year, don't care. Don't care. We still got the players going to be here. They'll be fine. And we'll find his replacement. He's going to be great this year. Really excited about it. But if he leaves after 1 year, that's okay. We're prepared. The Panthers are in a good spot. Fans are excited. There is positivity around this franchise now. I'm sure there's people out there who don't like the idea of Bryce Young, and they're going to hate the pick, and they're going to say he's never going to work and all that kind of stuff. And they might be right. They could be right. Never forget, the people that are negative, sometimes they turn out to be the truth tellers at the end of the day. But right now, we should all be united. We should all be so freaking fired up that we have a competent coach, we have a real GM, and the owner seems to be doing all the right things, I think. Positivity. That's what we're focusing on this week on Locked On Panthers as we inch closer to the draft. And I'm as excited about Friday night. What's going to happen at 39? What's going to happen at 93? I need those answers. But we got to wait. Got to get Thursday first, find out who that quarterback's going to be, hear what he has to say about coming to Carolina, hear what the Panthers have to say about bringing him in here, and then we'll move on to the last 2 days of the 2023 NFL Draft down there in Kansas City. If you're going to Kansas City, let me know. At me, DM me. Just let me know, hey, I'm there in Kansas City, Julian, and I'm going to get in the war room and let the Panthers know what they should do. Even though I don't believe they'll be there, I think they'll probably just be here in Charlotte. But you understand what I'm trying to say. On today's episode, Dane Brugler covers the NFL Draft for The Athletic. You've probably read him with his mock draft. Latest mock had Bryce Young coming to Carolina, BJ Ojulari from LSU going to Carolina at 39, the edge rusher, who would be a fantastic addition to the Carolina Panthers. And you probably also seen him quoted in some Joe Person articles in The Athletic as well. Joe Person, who covers the Carolina Panthers for The Athletic. Really good. Really sharp dude. Knows his stuff. Really respect him. And he was nice enough to give me some of his time last week. So now getting this now to you now. So very excited about this interview that you guys are about to hear from Dane Brugler, who I really hope that you're already following, as the guy is just really good at what he does. And you know how I feel about mock drafts. Bleacher Report had me do a mock draft. The simulator that you have on PFF that a lot of you guys always will tag me in or send me, they had me do one. And I just felt so dirty doing it after saying all mock drafts should go straight to hell, unless they're done by guys like Dane Brugler, who actually have intel and source information. And what it's telling him is that Bryce Young is going to be the pick. So we'll talk about Bryce Young. We'll talk about CJ Stroud, the possibilities the Panthers have. They are 39 and later on the draft coming up here on Locked On Panthers. But before we do that, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers, as promised, Dane Brugler. Follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. But if you're a Panthers fan, I'm sure you're already doing that. He's an NFL Draft Analyst for The Athletic. Dane, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Hard to believe we're just a week away now. It's. I feel like we have a good idea of maybe what could happen, but at the same time we don't. And you know what? I'm okay with that. It's going to make for a really entertaining top 10 this year with the questions with the quarterbacks and the trade action we might see. So a lot of intrigue as we lead up to this final week.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially here in Carolina. Since March 10th, the Carolina Panthers have been at top of the draft board, and they have been able to control the narrative of which quarterback they're going to take. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, or Will Levis. Now, when the trade initially happened, you put out a mock draft mocking CJ Stroud to Carolina, but your most recent mock draft this past week, you now have Bryce Young from Alabama coming to Carolina saying, I don't know what the Panthers are going to do, but I can tell you what teams believe the Panthers are going to do. Draft Young. If you are comfortable with his size, the Alabama passer is the easy selection at number 1. I talked to Matt Miller of ESPN.com about 2 weeks ago. He told me his initial intel was that the Carolina Panthers traded up for CJ Stroud, but it seems like the last couple weeks, things have changed where they're leaning Young. What happened? How did things change for Carolina as far as the league believing that they now favor Bryce Young?
I don't believe that they traded up looking for CJ Stroud. I think they traded up looking for Bryce Young. I really do.
Okay.
And that's what teams have told me. And when they made that move, my initial reaction, because we're coming out of the combine, and my initial reaction was, okay, CJ Stroud. I think that's the guy that everyone could get around with what he offers as a pocket passer, what he's able to do pre and post snap. Like, I just think that he would have been the guy that made sense. But as we get closer here, talking to teams, because obviously, mock drafts, where we do them on the outside looking in, teams do mock drafts. They map out how they think the top 10 is going to play out. And, because they want to try to look at different scenarios and, who might be on the board, whatnot. And the teams that I talk to, they have Bryce Young at number 1. That's what they believe is going to happen. And I understand why. Obviously, he's my number 1 quarterback. He's the top player in the entire draft, in my opinion. It just comes down to the size factor. And if you're okay with the size, you love everything else. And it's not as simple as questions about, can he see over the line? It's not about that. It's more durability. He's got a slight build. And this is a guy that welcomes the chaos. He is perfectly fine moving the pocket, sidestepping rushers, giving his routes an extra half second to get open. And he's going to anticipate those passing windows. He's going to hit them. But in the NFL, where everything's a little bit faster, guys hit a little harder, he needs to take care of his body, because even though he did come in at 204 at the combine, he's probably going to be playing around 190. He'll be the smallest quarterback in the NFL the moment he's drafted. So you have to be comfortable with that, and not everybody will. But if I'm the Panthers, you have to sacrifice something with all these quarterbacks. No such thing as a perfect quarterback. So you have to sacrifice something. I am okay sacrificing the size when I know I'm getting a guy that is well above average between the ears and playing the position at a high level because of his processing, his accuracy, the intangible factor. I'm going to bet on that all day. So if the Panthers do end up drafting Bryce Young at number 1, I'd certainly be on board with that.
I know a lot of people here recently have been making comparisons about Bryce Young to Russell Wilson. When you look at Scott Fitter having spent time in Seattle, same thing with Dan Morgan, the assistant general manager here in Carolina. Russell Wilson back in 2012 was 5'11", 204. So that's 1 inch taller and the same size that he weighed in at. Now, Russell has always been a thicker build. He's now, I think, about 215. At least that's what Denver lists him. And of course, he's still taller than Bryce Young. Could you see Bryce Young having the ability to put on the kind of weight there in Carolina as he gets older and with a better nutritional kind of game plan for him, that where he could be kind of fitting that mold of a Russell Wilson? Or is he always going to kind of have that slight build where durability will be a concern?
I don't think he's ever going to comfortably carry more than 205, 207 at the most. I think that's
is that playing weight, or is that just weight in general?
Playing weight, okay. But I think he's more likely. I think there's a better chance he will be below 200 for most of his career. It just comes down to the way he's built, his body structure. And, it's not like Alabama doesn't have this great nutritional program, right? I mean, and he was between 185 and 190 most of the season. So, and I just don't think he has that type of frame where he's going to be able to comfortably carry all this extra weight. And, there's a reason he weighed in at the combine, but didn't do anything. But then at the pro day, he did all the positional drills, but didn't weigh in. It's not a mystery here that he was probably back below 200 pounds. And you know what? It's okay. He's small. Either you're okay with it or you're not. I don't think it's a question of, if you can just get above, 208 or look, this is a smaller player and either you're on board with that or you're not. And so I do think that I did have the Russell Wilson comparison for parts of Bryce Young's game. And it's not necessarily the size. It's the fact that they're both problem solvers. I think that's what I love most about Bryce Young. He is a problem solver. And that's what, Russell Wilson, that's why he's been a productive pro all these years, is he finds a solution, whether it's with his legs, with his arm, with his mind. He finds a solution to move the offense and keep picking up first downs.
Who else would you compare Bryce Young to in the NFL currently, or past and present?
There's just not a lot of apples to apples comparisons, obviously, because that size. People yelled at me when I compared him to Steph Curry, a couple months ago. People didn't like that. But you know what? He plays the game like a point guard. He really does. Nick Saban has said that. So, it's not like I'm taking crazy pills here. And if Nick Saban says it, he's seeing something.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's the way he creates space for himself. The way he distributes the football. Obviously you think of a point guard and you think of a guy with vision where he sees everything happening on the court. And not just the vision, but the anticipation. So he understands where those opportunities are going to be. He's one step ahead. That's what Bryce Young offers. He sees everything going on in the field. He anticipates what's about to happen. And he has that quick reaction ability to no matter what is thrown at him, he has an answer. And it goes back to the problem solving. So I don't think there is a great comparison for him because of the size factor.
What about play style, though?
Play style, it's even play style. It's
okay.
I don't. Do you have one that you really like?
No, not really. That's kind of why I'm asking you. Because the thing is, it's such an outlier. Because when you watch him in college, and people have been saying this, he plays a lot bigger than he actually is. It's not like he was out there taking a ton of shots, and just the way that he always would maneuver the pocket and stay in there. When he had running lanes, I think back to the LSU game, plenty of opportunities where Bryce could have taken off, but he stays in the pocket, hangs in there, and is able to deliver a football. I don't know how many guys in the league. Well, obviously you don't have as much time as he did at Alabama, and they're telling you to get rid of the football. You got to have that internal clock, which I know Bryce has, but no, you don't really see guys play the way he played at the college level here at the NFL level. So I don't really have one. And it's interesting too, like the Steph Curry comparisons, because of course, Steph Curry being from Charlotte, Bryce Young potentially going to end up here in Charlotte as well. I can see where that comes from. I'm never the biggest fan of like the cross sports comparisons, but when you're looking at like a quarterback, what is he supposed to do? Distribute the football. Point guard's the same case. And then also Bryce can hit the home runs. Now, does he have the biggest arm in the world? No. But you saw him make plenty of those plays at Alabama and be able to extend plays and do some pretty doggone spectacular things, especially looking at the Texas game last year, LSU and Tennessee, although in losses, they're not in those games without Bryce Young, who had to pretty much carry that offense. And you saw the talent level outside of Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know if there's a pro right now on that Bama roster scale position-wise. And I get it's Bama. But 5 stars, it takes them some time sometimes to get there. And they certainly weren't to the level of John Mechie and Jamison Williams the year prior.
Oh, no question. And this Bryce Young grew up training for basketball. So it's no surprise that's his style. He had extensive basketball training growing up through middle school, and basketball was kind of his thing. That was his sport. So it's no mystery how it's translated to the football field. I think your point is spot on. He won the Heisman Trophy 2 years ago. Yet I was more impressed with his 2022 tape than his 2021 tape because of exactly what you mentioned. He didn't have the Jamison Williams, the Mechies. Jahmyr Gibbs is an awesome player. In my opinion, you can't name the top 25 players in this draft without mentioning Gibbs. I think he is that good of a player. But when Jahmyr Gibbs, when your running back is leading the team in receptions, that says something about one of my I would tweet this throughout the fall, but so okay, you watch the games on Saturday, just surface level, watching on college football on TV, and then Sunday when I would get the tape, first thing I would do, all right, go to church or wake up, go to church, come home, and I'd fire up the tape. And one of the first things I would do this fall would look at Alabama tape and see, okay, what magic act did Bryce Young have this week that will go down as an incompletion, won't even matter in the box score, but on tape, it's amazing. And against Texas, against Arkansas, I'll have to retweet some of I clipped some of them. I'll have to retweet some of them where he's just doing these magic acts in the backfield, throws a perfect strike to a guy coming open, and it's off his hands, and so it's in the box score, it looks like an incomplete pass. Meanwhile, the tape is just these mind-blowing plays. So it felt like, especially in that LSU game, he's putting the offense on his back and just dragging them up and down the field and just doing whatever he can. So a guy that, I know he played at Alabama, but 23-4 win-loss record. And some of those losses they were right there in it, could have easily won those games, including the national title game against Georgia 2 years ago. So I do think it's fair to critique his size. And I also think it's fair to critique, he doesn't have the biggest arm, like you said, especially from the pocket. When things are really closing in on him and, he's really constricted from the pocket, he loses a little bit of juice on his throws. And that is a fair critique to have about his game. But again, I'm okay sacrificing that for everything else that he offers at the position.
Yeah, no, I love Bryce Young. 2021, that year at the Heisman, didn't really feel like there was anyone who was just kind of like out front, the obvious choice. And after the Auburn game, they bring him back. I felt like that's kind of why he got it. But last year, I agree. He was far more impressive, especially when you look at what he was dealing with. No, people are going to roll their eyes, look at it's Alabama, but Bryce Young was incredible a year ago. And CJ Stroud has also been really good. So the Panthers have said, I know we spent a lot of time talking about Bryce Young because that looks like where it's headed next Thursday or this upcoming Thursday. A lot of people seem to believe that's going to be Bryce Young. Is CJ Stroud still in this? So is Anthony Richardson a potential trade back? What Scott Fitterer said right now, they don't think they're going to do that. Is that still a possibility, or is it pretty straightforward that come Thursday evening, it's going to be Bryce Young right there on the draft card, Roger Goodell up there at the podium announcing it?
I'll be surprised if it's anything but Bryce Young at the number 1 overall pick. But you never say never. We're at this point of the calendar. It's not guesswork. It's educated guesswork. So we're still reading tea leaves and going based off of what we hear. Like obviously, the Panthers aren't telling me what they're going to do, but teams that I talk to are telling me what they believe the Panthers are going to do. And, could the Panthers surprise those teams? Sure. It wouldn't be the first time that has happened, but they have a good sense of what they think these other teams are going to do and quarterbacks are going to draft. And, it comes from a lot of different ways of trying to figure that out. But, I think that they're still doing their due diligence on all these guys. And so, you want to keep an open mind. Why not? Why not keep an open mind until the moment you have to make a final pick? So I think that Bryce Young is a clear front runner here. But, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about CJ Stroud. More projectable body. He's 6'3", 215. He's really good from the pocket, really accurate, touches up the field, all 3 levels. I do think it's fair to critique, just like, we talk about Alabama and the supporting cast and how it wasn't up to snuff. Ohio State, he played with 2 tackles that are going to be drafted here, one in the first round, one in the second round. He playing with one of the best wide receivers we've seen in the last few years, and Marvin Harrison Jr. And then the other receivers are all future NFL guys.
I mean, he played with Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, who was just the NFL Rookie of the Year, who's hella player, and then that first game without those guys in the Rose Bowl. Jackson Smith-Njigba set a Rose Bowl receiving record at Ohio State. He might have been the best receiver of that receiving corps in that 2021 season. Now, hard to say that right now after seeing what Garrett Wilson just did this past year with the Jets.
He was most productive, at least that. He had the bigger stats than either of those 2 guys that year.
And then Emeka Egbuka last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's his receiving corps. And we're not even talking about Travion Henderson, who was banged up like all last year, and Mylan Williams and the running backs that he has there, and Evan Pryor's the guy who tore his ACL. Like they're loaded, and now you're bringing in even more players. Like Carnell Tate, one of the top wide receivers. Ohio State, it's just ridiculous the kind of talent around them, and it's one of those things where people are like, "Well, Ohio State quarterbacks." Like I don't really buy into that. I look at every prospect individually. Yeah, when you look at Bryce Young, I felt like it was so much more impressive because he needed an Ohio State wide receiver who couldn't even get on the field to be able to have that Heisman Trophy season in 2021. Like that just shows you how talented the talent there in Ohio State and Columbus is that CJ Stroud was working with. But I can't take anything away from him, especially after what he did against Georgia on New Year's Eve, because that about the most impressive quarterback performance that we've seen in the last couple of years in college football.
Well, and that's always the conundrum for scouts is, I mean, how do you have to factor in the supporting cast, obviously, but it's not like, okay, we're not going to draft CJ Stroud just because he had good players around him. Like you have to try and scout him independent of what's happening around him. And it's not just the receivers. It's the offensive line. It's the coaches, the play calling, the situation that he was in, all of the above. Is something that, you really have to focus on. And it's not always easy to do that, where you have to remove them from the situation. And, we went through this with Trevor Lawrence. We talked about it with him, or Justin Fields. It's why, one of the reasons why quarterback is the toughest position to evaluate. There's so many variables here that you have to consider. But with CJ Stroud, I had more concerns, and then that last game against Georgia, he did answer some of them. And to go out on the biggest stage he's ever played on, the best defense he's ever played against, and to play his best game he's ever played, that says a lot. People say that, the whole question about can he be creative enough? Can he work off schedule? It's not that he's a bad athlete. It's just, he's not comfortable doing that. And a lot of people say, oh, well, when he gets to the NFL, he'll run around more. And it's just not that simple. It's a comfort level with him. And so he is a good athlete. He has it in him, but he has to be okay with it. Go back to high school, go back to middle school. He's never been a running quarterback. He's never wanted to be a running quarterback. He wants to be a pocket passer. And that's great. There is nothing wrong with that. But in today's NFL, where you have to be able to work off schedule, you have to have a creative element to the way you play quarterback. You look at all the top quarterbacks around the league, that's a common theme. And so for CJ Stroud, he showed more of that against Georgia. And that's certainly encouraging. But is that something that can become a more regular part of his game? Because for the first 27 games of his career at Ohio State, he had a grand total of 1 missed tackle. One missed tackle forced. Against Georgia, he had 3. Can he make that a more regular part of his game? If he can, because I think right now you feel good about his floor. He's a really solid pocket passer. How creative he can become using his legs and improvising and all of that, that'll determine what his ceiling is. And that's where it's a little bit of a, I think he's a safe quarterback because of his floor. Figuring out his ceiling is a moving target, and something that's where the debate is with CJ Stroud.
Yeah, and it feels like that Georgia game was kind of a culmination of his career at Ohio State. It's everything that you wanted to see him be able to do things off structure. I think about in that first quarter, the touchdown pass where he's having to roll out to the right and he's guiding Marvin Harrison Jr. down the field. Like, that's exactly the kind of things that we've been waiting to see from Stroud. And obviously, you talk about the personnel, especially the offensive line. He wasn't always asked. He didn't have to do that. He was never really in those situations. Like maybe Michigan back in 21 in the snow game where Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks and you also have a job on the other side. Maybe that's the only time he's really kind of felt that pressure. And like Ohio State struggled. I don't think really he struggled in that game, but it's a culmination of all that. The unfortunate thing is it comes in a loss, and that was the final game of his career. Like it's not another season where we can see that he can be consistently that kind of player. Now coming to the NFL, like it's a lot to ask. Where Bryce Young, hell, they had to get a Vanderbilt transfer to come in and start for Bama this past year. Like that tells you the state of the offensive line in 2021. Like that tells you how bad. I mean, it's Bama bad, not bad, but like Bama's level of bad that past year. Before I get you out of here, let me ask you about 39. Because that's the Panthers' second pick in this draft. We've spent a lot of time talking about what's going to happen at number 1. Looks like Bryce Young's going to be that guy. CJ Stroud's still on the table. They're going to do their due diligence. But at 39, the Panthers still have some needs. I look at corner. When J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson went out week 17 against Tampa, they got cooked by Mike Evans. And those guys have not been able to stay healthy. I still look at that as a need. Edge rusher, outside of Brian Burns, I don't know how much you can really depend on Marquise Haynes, Frankie Louva to give you the kind of production they gave you a year ago. And in wide receiver, okay, you got Thielen, you got DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall. I still believe that he can be a key contributor here in Carolina, but I don't see someone who's going to be here in 4 or 5 years, no doubt. Of those 3 positions, what makes the most sense for you at edge? I know you have BJ Ojulari at LSU as your pick there. What makes the most sense for you right now for the Carolina Panthers at 39?
Honestly, I think that what makes the most sense is not predetermining the position you're going to take. You let the board fall to you, and I think where does that run on edge rushers go in that late first, early second, or corners? Is an Emmanuel Forbes there for you at that point at 39? Does a BJ Ojulari get to you? What about Felix Enudike Uzama? Does he fall to you at 39? So I think it's about letting the board fall to you. But I do think you're spot on with those positions, because with a top 40 pick, I think the goal should be to get one of those premium positions. You get your quarterback at 1, then you get your corner, your receiver, or your pass rusher. So those are the premium positions in the NFL. And so to get one of those at that point makes a ton of sense. How many receivers come off the board in the first round? How many pass rushers are in the top 35? Which of the corners are going to fall? I think that's an interesting dynamic here, because not everybody's on board with an Emmanuel Forbes or a Keely Ringo or a DJ Turner from Michigan. So I'm all in favor of not predetermining it and letting the board fall to you and see what your options are at that point in the draft.
Yeah, and of course, Scott Bitter said they use free agency to be able to go best player available in the draft. And he said also that he didn't want to trade away that 39 pick. They ended up trading like 61, the pick they got from San Francisco in the McCaffrey trade at Chicago, because that's kind of the meat of the draft. You said between 20 and 45. You talk about those positions and how many receivers go in the first round. Is there a run in corners, edge rushers? Which position group do you think most likely is going to have a run maybe at the end of the first round or maybe early second round there before Carolina gets on the board?
Probably, I think we'll see 4 or 5 corners go early. I think those guys will go pretty quickly. Edge rushers will see a run, but I do think it's so deep of a group that even if we see 5, 6 pass rushers go in the first round, there still will be some quality names there. And there's a lot of differing opinions of guys like Will McDonald from Iowa State, or Keon White, Georgia Tech. Derek Hall from Auburn has a lot of second round grades out there. So I think edge rusher probably, just because there's the volume of quality rushers in the top 50 this year, I do think that edge rusher probably the best chance of being there, even if we do see a run on those guys. But then even at receiver, we'll see how many end up going in the first round. If you go over under in the first round's at 3.5 right now, I think I'm taking the under, but I don't feel great about it. And then, who falls to the second? Is it Quentin Johnston? Is it, does Jalen Hyatt, is he still around? So where we are right now, based off of those 3 positions, I think the best chance of the highest rated player on the board being there at 39, I think it's going to be edge rusher. But, we'll see. We'll see which one of these receivers or corners maybe falls through the cracks. All
right, last one here for you. Linebacker. The Panthers need some depth there. I see you have Yusiro Dula out of Louisville going to the Panthers in the 5th round. Yeah. How deep of a linebacker class is this? They don't need someone to come in and start day one, but they got to have some sort of plan moving forward, because Brandon Smith didn't see enough out of him last year coming out of Penn State to know whether he can be a starter down the road. How deep is this linebacker class?
It's solid. I mean, I think that you can find guys in that third, fourth, fifth round range that could come in, be part of your rotation, compete for snaps. I'm a big fan of Dorian Williams out of Tulane, 6'1", 230 pounds, really long and still young, just 21 years old for a 4-year player. You can throw on the Cotton Bowl tape against USC and Caleb Williams, and he's all over the field. So you think about playing the run, playing in coverage. He gives you that. A guy like DeMarvion Overshown from Texas, a little bit of versatility. He was a high school safety. They played him as a off-ball linebacker, but he also rushed the quarterback. And then the guy that I projected there, Yasir Abdullah, another guy that has pass rush potential, but can also play on his feet in space. So, this draft, I think, will have some options there. If they wait until the third, fourth, fifth round range, there will be some names that are near the top of their list.
Awesome. Can't wait to find out what happens at number 1 and what the Panthers do at 39 and beyond in the draft with 6 picks coming up. Dane Brugler, NFL Draft Analyst for The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. But if you're a Panthers fan, you got to be insane if you're not already following this guy. Got you covered through the NFL Draft and, of course, throughout the year. Dane, any good stuff coming up here the next week? I'm sure you're busy. You got plenty of stuff going out there. Tell my listeners what else they can look out for you or look forward to seeing from you here in the next week.
Top 300 comes out this week, and then next week's the final mock. But really, it's just about the draft guide. If you have a subscription to The Athletic, the draft guide's included. It's free as part of it. I promise you. There's not another draft guide out there like it. It's got all the testing information from almost 1,900 players. A lot of good background nuggets in there. So if you like the draft at all, I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Sign up for The Athletic for a month. If you just try it out, get our draft coverage, you get the draft guide included. So like I said, 0% chance you'll be disappointed by it.
Yeah, and also if you have a New York Times subscription, I think you can also upgrade to get The Athletic. So no reason not to do that. Joe Person does a great job covering the Carolina Panthers. He has Dane up there plenty of times too in his articles, getting his thoughts on the draft. But Dane, really appreciate your time here on the show, man. And hey, enjoy your vacation whenever this draft is over, because I'm sure you're going to need one. I'm sure you're going to take one.
No, I appreciate the time, man. This was fun. It'll be fun after the draft, and maybe we catch up and talk about who they actually drafted and the fits and all that. So no, I really appreciate it, Julian.
Yeah, would love that. All right, take a quick pause here and Locked On Panthers, come back and wrap up the show. Really good stuff there from Dane Brugler of The Athletic, NFL Draft Analyst. Follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. But as I said, you probably already are doing that. If you're not, what are you doing, guys? What are you doing? Wake up. And you might not have Twitter, but go follow the guy. Does a really good job and gave us great insight in Bryce Young, also CJ Stroud, and what the Carolina Panthers might be doing. So really happy he gave us some time here. And the hope is that we can talk to him maybe after the draft and get his thoughts on the players Carolina Panthers actually select. So tired of talking about who they might take. Really want to know who they're going to take. Wish I could just look into the future and be able to answer that question for myself and for y'all right now. And also win a lot of money from Vegas. But a man can dream. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Coming up the rest of the week here on the show, going to talk to Mike K. Either going to have that for you tomorrow or Wednesday. Haven't decided yet. You'll get my final thoughts heading into the draft. We'll talk about, what the needs are, and we'll have the conversation we've been having at 1, at 39. Like, what did the Panthers do? We'll talk about all that throughout the rest of the week. I will be live Thursday night after the Panthers select Bryce Young, or they select whoever they select at number 1. It looks like Bryce Young. I'll give you my thoughts there. I will have a show for you. That will be Friday's show, but I'll come out on Thursday. And then I believe I should have a show for you on Saturday after I break down the second and third round of the draft. Now, I'm running an 8K on Saturday morning, the Elizabeth 8K. So I think I'll be up late enough. I should get some sleep, but I'm telling you right now, I'm going to have a show for you on Saturday, so I got to deliver that. If I don't, well, I'm sorry I lied to you, but I don't think I'm going to lie to you. All right, either way, follow me on Twitter, at Julian Council, where you have the weekly Friday mailbag. Check it out, subscribe, and follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And, of course, in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, as always. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday.